Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's May 15th SBCAG board meeting. For the record, I'm Steve Lavanino. I'm a director on the SBCAG board. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Director Silva, absent. Director Reyes-Martin.
Here.
Director Patino, absent. Director Mosby.
Here.
Director Lee.
Here.
Director Lavanino.
Here.
Director Julian.
Here.
Director Hartman.
Here.
Director Clark.
Here.
Director Capps, absent.
She's
In
here.
the back.
Yeah.
Director Brown.
Here.
Vice Chair Nelson, absent. And Chair Rouse, absent.
And we have a quorum?
Yes, there is a
Okay.
quorum.
If everybody could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, is there any, this is time for public comment for items not on today's agenda. Do we have any public comment, or was any provided in advance?
We did not receive any public comment in advance. However, if there are any members of the public on the Zoom webinar who wish to speak or attendees in Santa Maria, would you kindly use the raise hand feature on Zoom and I will call upon you. There are no attendees who wish to speak at this time.
All right, great. That takes us to our consent calendar. Are there any announcements for the consent calendar?
Thank you. There are no announcements for the consent calendar.
Okay, are there any directors who would like to pull any items from consent?
There are no items that wish to be pulled at
I
this.
see
just
our
wanna-
Caltrans.
Hi, I'm
Or
here filling in
Luce-
for Mayor Perotti
yes.
from Goleta. I just would like to abstain from item 4A, the minutes.
4A. Okay, can we take 4A separate? Can you read 4A into the record for us, please?
Item 4A, approval of minutes. Approve the minutes from the Board of Directors meeting on April 17th, 2025.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve those? 4A?
So moved, Hartman.
And I'll second.
Hartman and Capps. We have to do a roll call.
Director Silva, absent. Director Reyes-Martin is abstaining. Director Patino is absent. Director Mosby.
Aye.
Director Lee.
Aye.
Director Lavanino.
Aye.
Director Julian.
Aye.
Director Hartman.
Aye.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Capps.
Aye.
Director Brown.
Aye.
Vice Chair Nelson and Chair Rouse are absent. And the motion passes.
Okay. Now we'll take the balance of the consent calendar outside of 4A that was already approved. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Was there any public comment on any of the administrative agenda?
We did not receive any public comment for these items. If there are any members of the public on the Zoom webinar or any attendees in Santa Maria, are you interested in speaking? And I will call upon you. Please use the raise hand feature if you are on Zoom. There are no attendees who wish to speak to these items.
Great, okay. So we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call on the balance of the consent?
Director Silva is absent. Director Reyes-Martin.
Aye.
Director Patino is absent. Director Mosby.
Aye.
Director Lee.
Aye.
Director Lavanino.
Aye.
Director Julian.
Aye.
Director Hartman.
Aye.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Capps.
Aye.
Director Brown.
Aye.
And we have Vice Chair Nelson and Chair Rouse absent. The motion passes. Oh, Nelson is. And the motion passes.
Great. That takes us to item 5A. Madam Clerk, can you please read item 5A into the record?
Item 5A, Draft Measure A Program of Projects, Fiscal Year 25-26. The recommended action, hold a public hearing to review and comment on the Draft Measure A Program of Projects for fiscal years 2025-26 to 2029-30.
And before we get started, just for the record, Director Silva is now in attendance as well. So, all right, Ms. Mata?
Good morning, directors. Waiting for the PowerPoint to show up, but so yeah, my name is Jackie Mata, and I'm a senior transportation planner in the programming division at SBCAG, and I will be presenting the Draft Measure A Program of Projects for fiscal year 25-26. Next slide, please. So the purpose of today's item is to present the 5-year program of projects, which identifies all transportation projects to be funded with Measure A funds, covering the next 5 years. So that includes fiscal years 25-26 through 29-30. So when is this done? This is done every year as required by the voter-approved Measure A ordinance, and it's to show how Measure A funds are planned to be spent. Next slide, please. So the Measure A program of projects, or the local POP, or the POP as I'll be referring to it, is made up of the local POP and the regional POP. The local POP is developed by local agencies, and it consists of street, bikeway, and transit improvements. This is from the local street and transportation improvement category. And this is something that all of your councils have already approved, most likely. And then the regional POP is developed by SBCAG and Santa Barbara MTD, and it consists of named regional projects that are already included in the Measure A investment plan. Next slide, please. So it is estimated that $52.3 million will be available in fiscal year 25-26, and approximately $257 million over the 5 years, with 58% of that going to local jurisdictions as local pass-through, and 42% going to the regional programs and projects. Next slide. So this pie chart shows the local investment that are included in the local POPs. So it gives you a good idea how the local jurisdictions are spending their Measure A funds, with 61% going to street maintenance, and then the next highest category being the alternative transportation category at 19%. And so this alternative category, each jurisdiction must spend a minimum percentage of their local funds on eligible alternative transportation projects. And those are according to each of their respective agencies, so each one has a different percentage. And then the remaining categories, you can see the smaller percentages are safety improvement, traffic signal coordination, and the urban forestry street tree program. Next slide, please. And then moving on to the regional POP. So this is an example of one of the programs in our regional POP. We have separate bicycle and pedestrian and safe routes to school programs in the North County and also in the South Coast. So the next 2 slides give examples of projects in those programs. So this slide shows a crosswalk and pedestrian hybrid beacon at Calle Real and Fairview Center in the city of Goleta. And so currently for the South Coast, we're in the 6th cycle of the program, and we'll be presenting those Cycle 6 funding recommendations to your board and the South Coast Regional next month, and we'll incorporate those projects into the POP for the final. Next slide, please. And then this project is an example from the North County Safe Routes to School program. This is MOVE's Youth Bicycle Education Program. This project is from Cycle 4 of the program. And then besides these 2 regional programs, we have the regionally named projects as well, which we'll be talking about further in today's workshop later. And so just to emphasize the difference between the Measure A POP and the Measure A strategic plan. So the POP gives you a snapshot over a 5-year period, and the strategic plan focuses more on the regional projects over the life of the measure, so through 2040. And then next slide, please. And so this is my last slide, and it just goes over the schedule of approval and next steps. So this draft was presented to TTEC this month with no comments, and then the final will be presented in June to TTEC and to your board with allocations in July. And yep, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions now.
Any questions in Santa Barbara? How about Santa Maria? Oh, Director Mosby?
Can you go back to the pie chart you had there? Mm-hmm. On just a question, yeah. So this is something I've been looking for a while, because I know in my community we spend a lot on urban forestry. And what is the variance between areas on this? I mean, this is the average, I assume, right?
Yes. Yeah, this is the combined percentage for all the local jurisdictions, including North and South.
So what is the variance? So to say, obviously some communities, I mean, how far off from the average are we looking? It's 61% is spent on street maintenance. What is the high and low, I guess? What do some,
Yeah, I wouldn't know that, but I know that these percentages don't tend to change with each pop, but I'll have RGC.
So I think he's asking for the city data, a pie chart per city, like you want to
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So we can follow up with the entire board and provide you that table of all the percentages in these breakdowns for each city, so you can
Because
compare yourself to other region or other cities.
this helps in my argument because I think
Yeah.
Lompoc spends like 30% or 40%
Yeah.
towards tree trimming.
Okay.
And I'm like,
We-
this is why we can't patch holes, because you're trimming trees, and that should be coming from another pool. But it would be good to have that because it helps in my argument.
Okay.
We will provide that
Thank you.
table. Thank you.
Anything from Santa Maria? Hearing none, is there any public comment on this?
Are there any members of the public on the Zoom webinar who wish to speak, or are there any attendees in Santa Maria who wish to speak at this time?
Santa Maria's empty.
There are no attendees on the Zoom webinar who wish to speak.
Did I miss something that's happening in Santa Maria today? Okay. We don't have any public comment. There's no other questions. Any discussion? Can I get a motion? It's just a public hearing. Okay. Okay. So, thank you very much. Yes. Let's go to item 5B. Madam Clerk, can you read 5B into the record?
Item 5B, Connected 2050 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, RTIP SCS.
Okay, and this one's also a public hearing. So, Mr. Becker, you know how to run that thing right on. You're one of the few. Good job.
All right, I'm waiting for my PowerPoint too. I'm Mike Becker, Director of Planning at SBCAG. I'm here to provide a presentation.
Chair Lavanino?
Yes, Mayor Patino.
Yes, I'm here.
Right on. We'll hold the fort down.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Mr. Becker.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Today, we're here for the first of two public hearings related to the update of the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, which is we've called Connected 2050. Connected 2050 was also the name of the last one, so this time around we distinguish it with a 2025 in parentheses afterwards. And we intentionally kept the name the same because it is a light update. So here's what I'll talk about. I just want to provide an overview of what a regional transportation plan is and what the sustainable community strategy is. I want to provide a timeline of the update. When I was reviewing this, I'm like, those two words look out of order, but it's the plans update, the timeline for that. Provide an overview of this plan and the focus areas of what this update, as well as I'll discuss a couple of the challenges and opportunities that the region has, and then talk about the next steps going forward. So a regional transportation plan, it's one of our core responsibilities as a metropolitan planning organization. It's a requirement of federal law. Also there's state laws that require us to do this. And what it is ultimately, when you go back to your host or your home jurisdiction, you have a general plan or comprehensive plan. This is SBCAG's general plan or comprehensive plan. And it identifies how, as a region, we will invest in our transportation network over a minimum of 20 years. So we look at, this is it'll be brought for adoption in 2025, and we're looking out to 2050. So that's a 25-year horizon for this update cycle. It's required to be a minimum of 20 years. The plan is required to be fiscally constrained, which means we can't propose to spend more money than we expect to have available to use on transportation projects. And also, there's a variety of state and federal goals and policies that we bring local through this planning effort, so we advance the states and federal government's goals. There's 4 required components of the plan. The policy element talks about how we make what guides our decision making. The sustainable community strategy, which I'll talk a little bit about more in a minute. The action element highlights how we will invest in our transportation network, and the financial element says how we will pay for it. So the Sustainable Community Strategy is the result of Senate Bill 375, which passed in 2008, and it implements one aspect of Assembly Bill 32, which was renewed as Senate Bill 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act. And essentially what it requires us to do is to demonstrate through our regional transportation planning how we can achieve greenhouse gas emission reduction targets set by the California Air Resources Board. We have a target of minus 17% per capita for target year 2035, and that is compared to 2005 greenhouse gas emissions levels. To do that, there's a variety of tools. The way we invest in our transportation network has the ability to influence the greenhouse gas emissions. The way we grow as a region also has perhaps the biggest impact on how we reduce greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles. The policies which guide our decision-making, as well as built into Senate Bill 375, are a variety of CEQA benefits for developments and projects that align with the Sustainable Community Strategy. And despite the fact that we are required to look at a regional development pattern, the law is explicit, there's no requirement of consistency between what SBCAG does in terms of projecting out land use development and what the city councils and the board of supervisors ultimately approve in their own jurisdiction. If, as a region, we can't determine how we would meet the target, we have the ability to develop what's called an alternative planning strategy. So a sustainable community strategy would be how we will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and if we went the alternative planning strategy route, it's how we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's not meant to be read. This is just a graphic that I created for illustrative purposes. So it's 450,000 people approximately in Santa Barbara County, so each cell has 1,000 people in it. And so we have the per capita average VMT in the middle, the yellow highlighted row. On the far right is our supercommuters, our Uber drivers, the people who drive a lot, high VMT population. On the left are the people who live next door to where they work and they walk to work. So essentially what our goal, or what we have to do, or the challenge is through a sustainable community strategy, is to move that bar to the left, move that yellow bar to the left. How do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions? There's 2 ways to do that. One is you get part of the population that's on the right side to the left side to pull it to the left. The other way is for new growth to be on the left side, which would naturally pull the bar to the left. So those are essentially that's the fundamental challenge of the Sustainable Community Strategy. How do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions through transportation investment, as well as the ways we grow as a region. And now to touch on the timeline, I think as Margie mentioned, this is like the Golden Gate Bridge. As soon as you're done painting one side, you start over on the other. We got into this about 2.5 years ago, and we've had 2 public processes to this point, and we've completed development of the draft regional transportation plan, and we've also developed a draft addendum to the EIR. We're conducting public hearings now. So the first public hearing is today, and the second one will be during your August meeting, which is when we will bring the plan for consideration for adoption. In this update, we found that the region has approximately $6.2 billion available of transportation revenues for projects. However, it allocates about $5.5 billion to actual projects. And the difference there is because we were directed in the past to assume a continuation of a measure into the future. So we have that period post-2040 to 2050 where we haven't identified those priorities yet. So that's coming, and as each RTP is updated, that will become clearer. And we were successful through this of demonstrating that the region could reduce greenhouse gas emissions from light-duty vehicles by 17% through the development patterns as well as the transportation investments. We follow the goals provided by the state, and these haven't changed for the last, since I've been here, so the last 3 update cycles, we've maintained the same planning goals, and they're very broad. So in our region, we have a jobs housing imbalance. So the primary way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is to have people drive less. So we look to close the imbalance between where people live and where they work. And I've described this in the past as kind of a 2-pronged strategy. The first is you look at the people who are doing really long commutes, try and transition 40, 50-mile commutes into 5, 10-mile commutes. And then on the other hand, to take the people who do have shorter commutes and look for ways to improve transportation efficiency, whether it be through transit services or carpooling, van pools, or improving a bicycle network so you get more people with bicycle commuting. So those are the 2 ways, is address the long distance commuting and then support efficiency in the short distance commuting. And there is a limit to what we can do on the transportation side. The bulk of the funding goes to just to maintain the network that we have. And then it's really the balance outside of that is the Measure A projects, which essentially are already identified. So through this, the biggest tool that I see that SBCAG has is the RENA process, where we allocate housing units. And so when we went through that in the last update cycle, we focused on addressing the jobs housing imbalance, and that resulted in much larger numbers coming to the South County than the North County. This is going to be difficult to see, but it's also in your attachment. It's just a map of some major regional projects. These are aligned with Measure A. This map shows the North County. Could have brought everybody some reading glasses. And then there's another map of the South County. And again, it aligns with Measure A, and it also aligns with the major investments that are currently going on in the city of Santa Barbara. They're getting ready to start the Cliff Drive transformation. The county has its Modoc Road bicycle project going on, and the city of Goleta has Project Connect going on. And we're still focused also in the south on finishing the 101. Okay, so as we got into this update cycle, we realized there were not a whole lot of catalysts for significant change in the plan. So we said, well, let's focus on a couple things that will improve the plan. And those are, I'll touch base on each of these, but updating the way that we include projects in the plan, improving the readability of the plan, as well as addressing new requirements that came along since the last plan. So first for the project list, and I believe this was the first touch we had with the board as we got started, as we wanted to define what types of projects end up in the regional transportation plan. There's a lot of projects that you do at your cities or at the county that are not regionally significant, that don't need to be in here. And as well, if the board does not have discretion at some point in time on a project, it perhaps doesn't make sense that it's in the plan. So we said, let's define the transportation network that is regionally significant, and then we'll focus on those projects, as well as any project that will ever come to this board where this board has some level of discretion over. So we narrowed the projects. I think it was about a 40% trimming. And really what was cut was just a lot of the local capital projects. For a regional plan, repairing sidewalks in a neighborhood is perhaps, and if this board has no jurisdiction over it, it's not necessary to be included. So we really wanted to focus on what's required to be included in the plan. There's 3 types of projects included. First is programmed. This is where money has been married to a project, and it's going to be implemented or built in the near term. Planned are projects that fit within our budget. We expect them to be built whenever the time comes. And then the illustrative projects are those that we don't, they represent a transportation need. However, we're at this point unsure where the funding would come from to implement them. And as I previously mentioned, we are required to be fiscally constrained, meaning that we can't budget more on projects than what we expect to have available. So that's the project list. Readability, I could thank Lauren for quoting myself here. as we got through, this is a large part of my job. So if anybody's read the transportation plan a lot, it's been me. And it's gotten to the point, because it's so many requirements and it's become overly technical, to the point where I was having a hard time following it. And if I can't follow it, I don't know how other people would. So we wanted to simplify it, say, let's make it so everybody can understand what they're reading if they read the Regional Transportation Plan. And I think we were successful in that. We really focused this time on Chapter 2, which is a sustainable community strategy. It was completely scrapped and rewritten. And then the executive summary as well was completely scrapped and rewritten. And we also we touched every single part of it in terms of trying to improve the readability, but really the big focus was on those 2 chapters. And I think we were really successful in making it more comprehensible to a broader audience. And finally, there was some new requirements came along. The California Transportation Commission updated its Regional Transportation Plan guidelines to incorporate any requirements that came out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And one of those requirements that fell upon us this year is because the region surpassed 200,000 people in population in the South Coast urbanized area, we're required to include a congestion management program in the Regional Transportation Plan, which we did. It's part of the appendix document. Okay, so I just want to touch on a couple challenges that we try to, or at least are on our mind as we go forward planning. This first one, if you were at sub-regionals yesterday, you saw the population pyramid related to we are growing older. And that is certainly true. If you look at the bar graph on the left, with the 50 through 80 plus, that population is growing, and the middle of the population there, the 30 to 50, is declining over time, and that's going to have some implications in the future. And on the right side, it shows that we are growing economically. However, this is going to reach a critical point at some point in the future, being that more and more of our housing is going to be occupied by people who are not in the workforce, which puts a lot of pressure on long-distance commuting. So that's something that we have to keep in consideration as we move forward. This one, you may have seen this one before. I really like this graph, but what it is, it shows it's countywide commuting. So across the x-axis is the commute distances. So shortest distance on the left, longest distances on the right. The proportion of the population that fits within those distances. And then the lighter pink bar is the vehicle miles traveled attributed to that population for commuting. And you could see, if you look at the last bullet, the longest 5% of commutes account for the same vehicle miles traveled as the bottom 86% of commuters. So it really highlights how that long distance jobs housing imbalance really impacts the region in terms of vehicle miles traveled, which is correlated to greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so today we're here for the first of 2 public hearings. The second one, as well as the consideration of adoption for the Regional Transportation Plan, will occur during your August meeting. And then we are also conducting a public comment process. We've released the plan through stakeholders, through the advisory committees, through people who have participated in the process. In the past, we've also advertised in the news media. So we're accepting comments through the next hearing, though we did ask our advisory committees to provide comments a little bit before that. And we will make any adjustments. We'll come back for the second public hearing in August and hopefully get the plan adopted. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from staff, from the board? Mr. Lagvino.
Mike, can you go back a couple slides to the one that showed economic growth by region?
Sure.
I just wanted to know what that, yeah, okay, so on the chart on the right, what is the number on the baseline there? What is that showing? 5,000 what, or 4,000 what?
So that's new jobs. So
New
that's
jobs.
new jobs between 2010 and 2020.
Oh, it says there, jobs,
Yeah.
okay. Got it, thanks.
Commissioner Hartman.
Thank you. So the congestion management plan is a new requirement for the South Coast.
So could you elaborate a little bit? How do we manage congestion down here?
Sure.
Especially, I'm interested in the Stork intersection, off-ramp.
That's Director Hartman, the federal congestion management program, really, the purpose of it is to identify how we address congestion. And what the federal government is looking for with that is essentially we exhaust all other options before we'd look at expanding capacity. And that's, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It says we are going to explore every single option before we say, okay, we need to add capacity to address this issue.
Could you just describe some of those options?
Yeah, so improving transit, ramp metering, travel demand management strategies, what the multimodal program does. It's everything you can do up to the point where there's nothing left to do.
Right. I just wanted to raise one other issue that came up yesterday for us at the North County Subregional, and that was the corridor study for 166 that's underway, and that is a severely congested corridor that is now identifying projects, and it's not quite in time for this plan, but one thought is that we could amend this plan once we have a priority list of those projects. So I just wanted to mention that here because at least in the North Subregional, there seemed to be general agreement that we would like to do that because otherwise, if we wait for Measure A, it's the new Measure A, it's a long time off. And as we've all learned, getting things in plans is the first step towards getting them done. So just wanted a placeholder for that.
Okay, Director Hartman, yes, we can most certainly amend the plan, and this board approved an amendment to the current plan, I believe 2 months ago, for a Caltrans project. Yes, so.
Very good. Director Brown.
We had some conversations, and I'd like to, for the illustrative action item, there's, we all still have in our mind that disaster in Pacific Palisades where cars were bulldozed off the side of the road because of lack of access for evacuation. I'd like to have you include in your plan some sort of evacuation alternatives as it relates to some of the more rural communities, including Solvang and perhaps others. I think Goleta might have a terrible issue if there were an earthquake and one of the freeway was impacted in some way. But if that could be included, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, Director Brown, Margie and I touched base on this after you and I spoke earlier this morning. And I think the next step that we want to do to address this is perhaps have a conversation with Randy Murphy and see how we can best incorporate this. And we also need to do a little bit of investigating to make sure that this falls under our purview, whether or not it's us supporting, say, county emergency services, or if it's something for SBCAG, but we'll do that investigation and we'll talk with Randy, and when we come back in August, you'll see whatever change that we made to accommodate.
Any further questions from board members here? Questions from Santa Maria?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you. It really seems to me that the two policy pieces here are really, dealing with the housing allocation, and is that identified in this plan at this point?
Director Nelson, because there's not a RENA in this cycle of the Regional Transportation Plan, that occurs every other cycle. So when we go into the 2029 plan, we'll be doing RENA on top of that. And then they kind of move in tandem and work together. So starting probably in a year and a half or so, we're going to start rolling back into RENA. And that's the next plan will reallocate housing across the region. This one, because we're in the middle of a RENA cycle, it does not consider updating the RENA.
Okay, so the 60-40 split that currently exists is memorialized in this? Is that how that works, or?
Director Nelson, yes, because we don't have the ability to change that now. So like, as we get into the 2029 plan, it's a fresh thing. It's up for complete brand new debate. But that was approved, I believe, in 2021, the RENA allocation. So the next one will be approved 8 years later in 2029. But at this point, we don't have the ability to change the 6th cycle of RENA.
Okay, at some point, do we start to bake in some of the narratives into the plan to anticipate that in future cycles?
Yes, yes. Let me think about how we can incorporate some language related to future RENA cycles, and that will also be part of what we bring back in August.
Because I think that'd be really helpful to kind of start to, signal that that's the way it needs to go. Because again, I know that there's talk about the RENA process that there was a lot less in the North County, and it was just really a 60-40 split. And really, the numbers were so less, or the rezones were less than North County because we actually had an existing inventory of properties that were already zoned. So we were able to meet our RENA with what we already are doing in the North County region. So, I want to make sure I kind of correct the record. I know there's a lot of people think there that we didn't get, it was unfairly shifted down to the South Coast. It was really only a 60-40 split, which is pretty conservative considering the problems that exist. And but I definitely think that that's really, part of the housing issue and the affordability issue is driven by the South Coast rents numbers, and it's almost a 2-to-1 issue between the North and the South on home ownership as well as rentals. And I think that's when we look at this again, and I guess that's now 4 years from now, we should probably have a split that's kind of proportional to that. If it's 2-to-1, maybe that's, instead of looking at a 60-40, maybe we look at a 66-33 allocation to try to solve that problem. The other piece that really helps drive these numbers is jobs, and what can we do for jobs here at SBCAG? And it really is, it's infrastructure, and what are we doing to, invest in more infrastructure so that jobs can come from that, because we all know that if you don't have the infrastructure there to plug into, the business can't do it. Or if you try to make the business have to pay for that infrastructure, the price is too high for them to be able to start moving in that direction. So, I think we need to be looking at our policies and asking ourselves, what can we do to, continue to invest more in the North County to drive those jobs and to, in whatever direction, and also be looking at what we're doing to potentially discourage jobs. I know it's topical for this last week of actually potentially eliminating North County jobs. So maybe putting policies in place that really discourage the elimination of the existing inventory, but growing it. So those would be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Are there any further questions from Santa Maria? All right, very good. Madam Clerk, are there any public speakers submitted for this item?
So we did not receive any public comment for this item in advance, and if there are any members of the public who wish to speak on item 5B on the Zoom webinar, including Santa Maria, would you please use the raise hand feature on Zoom, and I will call upon you. And there are no attendees who wish to speak at this time.
All right, very good. Madam Counselor, I am a little confused on this. This is just an informational item. We don't need a motion or not?
Yes, it was a public hearing, so we
Very good.
solicited public comment and received none.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to ask the clerk to read item C into the record, please.
Item 5C, Highway 101 Carpinteria to Santa Barbara Corridor Construction Update. Recommended action, receive a presentation of progress on construction in the Highway 101 Carpinteria to Santa Barbara project.
Hey, Mr. Luna.
Mr. Chair, if you were just a time check, so we can make this presentation as short as, maybe 10 minutes, because you do have a meeting at 11 that we need to adjourn to. So
thank you.
It's our workshop for the 101 strategic plan. And we're providing lunch to you all. So, yes. So, okay. Confused faces behind you, Randy. That's why I'm elaborating on my comment.
And we know lunch is important. So, okay, I'll speed this along. Are you guys they're considering? Okay. Should I just go? Okay. So good morning, Chair Rouse and Fred Luna with SBCAG, Director of Project Delivery. Today's presentation's focusing on Update on Highway 101 construction that's ongoing, and then current operations that are underway for pre-construction and the planning going forward. This slide here shows the 11 miles of the Highway 101 Carpinteria to Santa Barbara corridor. I think if you just had two takeaways here on how to measure how much work has been done is that we started work in 2020, we're now in 2025, our 6th year of construction, and if we get funded next month, we plan to be built and finished by 2028, so we're over the hump. That's one metric to look at. The other thing is of the 7 miles, we finished 7, of the 11 miles, we finished 7. And so obviously we have a majority of the work behind us, but there's still a lot of major and important work ahead of us. Yeah, we'll move on. As part of our work going on for the Segment 4E North, that work will include the Cabrillo Interchange and associated projects in the Santa Barbara area. And like I just said, we would be hearing about those projects and funding for that next month. And that would include the Cabrillo southbound on-ramp for Director Rouse. So, we just celebrated the completion of 7 miles of opening of HOV lanes on segment 4B and 4C, the Padaro and Summerlin segments. So there was an event on April 25th. Some of the major components included a whole new interchange at Sheffield, Evans Avenue undercrossing in the community of Summerlin, which was very important with local ped and bike improvements there, sound walls in certain areas. So there was also Memorial Oak plaques that were installed in this area, along with a special barrier in the median in the Padaro segment. Even though we're done with construction, we've opened up. There's still some post-construction activity. I just want to alert the board if you hear anything about work going on. There's landscaping that's ongoing in the Padaro segment. That's always done after construction to make sure that it's getting done without conflict. There's a separate mitigation project at Toro Creek that's required for permitting purposes. There's also parallel projects that are ongoing. There's work on Santa Claus Lane ongoing right now, phase 1 of the Santa Claus Lane streetscape that's being done by the county, and plans for starting phase 2 next year. In the Summerlin area, we've completed all our landscaping, and there's about 3 county projects that are ongoing right now, 2 in construction, and then 1 that would start construction later this year. So I'm going to quickly just go through some construction photos. Majority of the work is focused on 2 miles in Santa Barbara and Montecito segments. This shows initiation of work on some of the creek bridges. We understand how important the creek bridges are in Montecito. Going back to the debris flow that happened several years ago and even prior to that, the goal of the project was to bring those up to current hydraulic capacity standards. But we also had to widen them to make sure they would support 3 lanes of traffic. And so through the CMGC process, we were able to come up with a way to build the bridges outside the current bridges. And what you're seeing here is they're building the walls vertically outside the old smaller bridges, and then they'll bulkhead that off. And then that helped save schedule, cost, and environmental considerations because you had less work in the creek. So you can see here they've already formed up the bridges. That previous photo showed you and so they're getting ready to pour the walls for the new creek bridges. And then this shows the placement of precast girders on top. So there's a deck that's poured on top that's part of the final roadway surface. So this is just kind of the sequence of the construction that's going on for all 3 creek bridges. Another important aspect that you've probably seen if you've driven the 101 is the divided lane configuration. So hopefully you haven't been affected by that personally, but we did quite a bit of outreach to make sure that people were aware of what was going on. What you're seeing here is the divided lane installation with the concrete barrier being placed at night and then major traffic shifts. So this is in the northbound direction near Olive Mill Road. And then at times, because we're adjusting the grade or the profile of Highway 101, the area that we're working could be lower than the adjacent area that's already been constructed or has traffic. And so sheet piling needs to be installed. So you're seeing here is they're driving some sheet piles just to support the area where the traffic is so that the workers can safely operate in that construction area. And then you see here is just an excavator tearing out the old pavement. The traffic's already been shifted over in the divided lane configuration, so they're preparing for the new concrete paving. One thing that's unique about the continuously reinforced concrete paving in this corridor is that after we've installed the sub-base material, then they add a layer of asphalt that provides kind of a level mat for reinforcement, and then they come in and do the concrete, and you'll see this in the next photo. So you see here that the asphalt's already kind of dried, and they've placed these reinforcement mats, and then they pour the concrete over that. So no seams, quieter pavement, and long-lasting, sustainable for years to come. Moving into the Santa Barbara segment, this kind of shows the divided lane configuration. So they're working to drive or drill holes to drive in ultimately some of those I-beams that were to help support the shoring. And this shows near Coast Village Road, working with the community there on Coast Village Circle. There was a lot of drainage that was needed to get done there, and then we needed to take some parking in this area, but we made sure local officials were notified of that, and we asked the contractor to do it in 2 stages so that it was less of an impact to businesses. And this just shows continuation of that drainage work in that area, and nearly done right now. And so we'll be pointing forward to a stage shift in the next month or so. So as kind of segueing to that, what can the board expect, or what you can hear, and what can the community hear in the next coming months? In the Montecito and Santa Barbara segment, we're just going to continue work on the creek bridges and the work on Coast Village Circle. And there is, and then in the Santa Barbara area, the big thing that we're pointing towards is getting the package ready for construction next March, assuming we get funded. And so there's a lot of pre-construction work going on, collaborating with our partners at the city, making sure the design's complete, and then tightening up that design work. And then we'll start a community outreach in the fall. We've already, with some of our directors and board members, have planned for meetings to kind of outline what our strategy is for public outreach when we start the 40 North project. And as always, we have our SB Roads website. Measure A helps fund that so that we can support questions from the community and the construction. And if you have any questions, that has all the information on the detours and the most recent construction updates.
Thank you. Questions for staff? The board? Any questions from Santa Maria? Okay, hearing none.
No questions up here, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, any public comments submitted?
We did not receive any public comment for this item in advance, and if there are any members of the public on the Zoom webinar who wish to speak, would you please use the raise hand feature, and I will call upon you.
All right, very good. This is not an action item. Any board discussion? Ready?
For the record, there were no attendees who wished to speak on Zoom.
All right, very good. I believe with that, we can move to the Executive Director report. Director Kern.
Mr. Chairperson, members of the board, in the interest of time, I gave my report at the sub-regionals yesterday, and it's the same report. So thank you.
Okay, very good. We'll move then to the Caltrans Director's report.
1 minute. Good morning, Chair Rouse, Directors Veronica Lizama, Branch Chief for Regional Planning, on behalf of District Director Scott Eads. Just 3 brief items to report on. First is that Caltrans is hosting a hybrid meeting for the State Route 246 Robinson Bridge replacement and pavement project in the city of Lompoc and at City Hall on May 29th at 6 p.m. Happy to share more information after the meeting with the directors. Second is that the Highway 154 Baseline Edison Roundabout project has been completed. And lastly, Michael Kiever has been announced as the Caltrans interim director following the departure of Director Tony Tavares. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Director Hartman?
Yes. At yesterday's North County Subregional, I talked about the stoplight coming out. And this morning, there's been an accident, a T-bone. So just want to, that's what the community is telling us. And so I'm just conveying that. It's a real concern.
All right, any further questions or comments?
I got a question up here.
Yeah, Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rouse. I've gotten some feedback from some of my constituents on the Betaravia South off-ramp, or I guess on-ramp, as well as the area south of there. There's significant potholes, which is causing problems for especially motorcycles, and was wondering if you could check on the maintenance of that exit, as well as the couple miles from there. There's quite a bit of potholing along the 101 between Betaravia and Santa Maria Way, and was wanting to get a status on maintenance.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Nelson.
All right.
Thank you.
And if there are no further comments, as long as we got Director Nelson on the line, we'll move to his Calvans report.
Yes, thank you, Director Rouse. Calvans is in full swing as the harvest season is ramping up. As many of you know, the Calvans, about 90% of our users are agricultural workers. And so we're deploying those, as well as continuing to work with the state on trying to get our model, which is a one-off model, to comply with some of the new state regulations that are preventing us from expanding our fleet. It's kind of a backwards concept where we need to acquire vans that don't exist to be able to do carpooling, which also supposedly helps the environment as well. So it's this Sacramento doesn't always make sense, but we're trying to navigate that. We're bringing on some additional executive staff to try to navigate that for the organization and hopefully grow it. It's a good program. It's one of the few transit that's full cost recovery, so it doesn't actually cost the taxpayers anything. It's completely funded by riders, and it's a great model. And we continue to work hard to make it as effective and grow it as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you. And with that, we'll move to the 1-minute reports. Any of the board members have a 1-minute report? Anyone from Santa Maria with a 1-minute report?
No reports here.
Okay, and if there's nothing else, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.